What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you that don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you'll consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down the 6th episode in Season 3 of the Paramount hit TV show, Mayor of Kingstown. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if you haven't gotten around to watching this episode yet and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. So this episode starts with Rhonda arriving at her shop early one morning, with Bunny's guys standing out front, as they always seem to be, smoking. Again, as they always seem to be. And, Rhonda tells them that she won't open until they move the wake and bake down further in front of Bunny's shop, because she doesn't want her customers seeing all that. So she enters the shop, she turns on some music, and she prepares to open for the day. And as the music plays, we see Mike driving through Kingstown, crossing over the infamous bridge. We also see an inmate that has been attacked being brought into the infirmary, with Tracy and another nurse attending to her. Now, Tracy asks a nearby female CO to go and get a doctor for her. The CO tells her that she can't do that. Tracy then demands that she either put her hand over the inmate's wound or go get the goddamn doctor. Now, Mike continues driving through town, and he seems to be deep in thought here, as the music continues. But back at the shop, a truck rides by with two white boys, one driving and one standing up in the flatbed in the back. And as they approach the shop, the truck stops, and the men open fire, killing one of the men standing outside. And Digo, the other man, he stands up after the truck finishes shooting, and he fires back as the truck speeds away. And when Digo looks inside the shop, we see that Rhonda has been shot dead. Roll credits. And, look, this was a bit disappointing to me, specifically because I had been wondering what Rhonda's purpose was in the overall narrative. I wonder why the writers had her show up last season, more than the once. And then she was brought back this season, this being, I believe, her third appearance. And the whole storyline about her and Mike being flirty, like it was going to amount to something. And I was pretty confident that she and Mike weren't going to be together. But I was at least hoping for something that affected the plot, because Rhonda had taken a lot of screen time away from Rebecca. Instead, it seems she was simply jammed down our throats over the course of 2 seasons, just so we could watch her get killed off by the Aryans unceremoniously. And, I don't know. It was a lot of wasted screen time for nothing, if you ask me. Anyway, next we see Ian on the scene, as well as Mike. We also see Bunny is standing off to the side. He's taking in the surroundings. Mike goes and talks to him. And Bunny feels like he's being baited by the Aryans, telling Mike that when something like this happens, the whole hood has to see him. Mike offers his condolences before telling Bunny not to fall for the bait. And, eventually Bunny gets back in his truck and his driver pulls off. Now, at the prison, we see Kareem taking a call from Mike. He tells Kareem that the Aryans and the Russians are working together, and he asks if Kareem can get Merle into AdSec. Now, Kareem tells him that he can. Mike tells him that he will deal with the Russians on the outside, and Kareem says okay. Mike then asks Kareem if he's okay. Kareem answers yes, then asks why. And Mike just responds, nothing, thanks, and then hangs up. We then watch Kareem looking out over the yard, and clearly he looks nervous about something. And, I've been telling people that Kareem doesn't want to be helping Mike. And I believe that the only reason that Kareem is helping Mike is because Mike understands that Kareem killed an inmate when he came back from leave after the prison riot in season 1. And so I just think Kareem maybe feels squeezed a bit from both ends. You know what I'm saying? I don't think he thinks that Mike's really any better than dealing with the actual inmates who are inside the prison, but I guess he feels like, well, I've got to do this in order to keep my secret. And so that's kind of where I just think Kareem is just stressed, basically. Now, Next, we see Merle walk in the yard with one of his Norsemen, and because that's what IMDb says, Norsemen, and he's asking Merle if they should be bringing in more unaffiliated people in an effort to boost their numbers. And Merle basically tells him to save that crap for the trailer park. Now, the pair stumble upon a dead rabbit, and Merle inspects the animal. Now, the Norseman asks if a cat could have gotten to it, but Merle, said, hey, well, look at the animal. What do you see? He tells him that the animal has a broken neck and a chest puncture. The meat and the organs gone. And that it was probably killed by a Cooper or a red-tailed hawk. And that whichever animal killed him was smart enough not to eat shit. And this is just symbolism, plain and simple, meant to make a point about the conversation that was just being had between the two characters. Now, inside the visiting area of the prison, we see Raphael having a visit with Ro, his son's mother. Now, she tells him that she has another funeral to arrange, so things are pretty bad on the outside. And as they're talking, we see Kevin Jackson, the black CO affiliated with Bunny, walking around and observing the inmates. Now, Raphael asks Ro to pull their son out of school and effectively leave Kingstown. Because, with everything that's happening on the outside, he feels like they're in danger. He asks why his son isn't there, and Ro tells him that he had a big test at school. Raphael tells Ro to tell him that he's proud of him. And at that point, Ro reaches out and she touches Raphael's hand. And one of the white guards sees her and accuses her of trying to pass contraband. So after that, two other white guards approach and they grab him and they take Raphael away while the first guard begins to search Ro. And, as she watches Raphael being carried off, she tells him, this is what they do. They can't reach us, baby. But the guard detaining Ro responds, oh, I can reach you. The other two guards begin to rough Raphael up a bit, and Ro sees it, and she begins screaming at the guards to stop, all as Kevin Jackson looks on. And, this is why I think Bunny wanted Kevin Jackson working inside the prison. I think he's just essentially Bunny's eyes and ears. It looks like I said, it might just be simple as that. It doesn't feel like he's there to do anything necessarily. It just might be an observe and report type situation. Anyway, next we find Mike at his favorite diner with his favorite frat bros, and he's telling them that he doesn't know if or when Bunny will hit back, but that they need to manage his options. He tells them that the Aryans and the Russians are now partners, for those of them who didn't already know that, and that Kareem is going to put Merle in AdSeg. But in the meantime, he needs Carney to turn off the spigot and find the drugs inside. Carney tells Mike he can put Merle in the box all he wants, but that they still can't figure out how the drugs are coming in. And then Mike just tells him essentially to get it done. Carney, he seems frustrated, but he agrees before he gets up and he leaves. And that's when Ian asks what they plan to do about the Russians. Now, Mike tells him to just box them out. He wants them to get a warrant and serve it. Now, Big Rob seems to relish the chance to undo some Russians, but Mike tells him that they're not taking a shot on this. Rob tells him that, hey, shit happens. And Mike tells him that they have people inside the organization, that being Iris, so he doesn't want anyone shooting. He tells Rob and Kyle that it's not a raid, that it's just a warrant. He tells them to do that and only that before he too gets up and leaves. Now, inside the women's prison, we see Cherry in a lot of pain. She tries to alert a nearby CO, but is ignored. And if they know what we know, you better ignore her when she starts talking about not feeling good. Boy, you better stay far away if you're a corrections officer. But eventually she falls to the floor and her water breaks. So, she's indeed going into labor. And in the next scene, we see her finally being carried into an infirmary by 3 male COs, one of which is CO Breen, and he is announcing that she is indeed in labor. Now, they put her on a gurney and they immediately handcuff her, which I understand. But Tracy tells him to uncuff her. Now, the doctor reminds Tracy that they can't. Tracy then reminds them that the patient is already hemorrhaging and that if she can't bend her legs, that the baby won't make it out safely. The doctor tells Tracy to let him worry about the baby, and then Tracy asks, and what about the mother? Now, at that point, CO Breen comes in and he walks Tracy out of the room. And he tries to convince her that everything's going to be okay, that the prisoner has to be restrained. He tells her that it's a shit policy, but that it's a policy designed to protect them. Now, Tracy tells C.O. Breen that in her state, she isn't going to overpower anyone, so she doesn't need to be cuffed. He then tells Tracy that she needs to just take a beat and that she can come back calm, and that if she can't, it's okay, and that he'll take care of everything. And, Tracy just kind of looks him in the eye, and she finally agrees, and she walks away. And I really think that this might be C.O. Breen's kid. Because I'm thinking, him and Tracy is formulating this friendship, and she seems like he's the one CO that can kind of talk her down, like she maybe is starting to trust him. And I think this is setting up for Tracy to find out that this is C.O. Breen's baby, and then for her to just have to change her whole view of this guy. So next, we see Mike meeting Evelyn at what looks like the Kingstown courthouse. He tells her that the Soviet problem is even worse than they thought, that they're greedy, they're tight with the Aryans, and that they want everything, including the prisons and Bunny. Evelyn asks Mike why he's telling her this, and he tells her that Merle is being put in ADSEC and that Constantine is being taken off the table, so to speak. Now, Evelyn asks Mike if he's doing it or if it's KPD. He tells her that it's a cop call. She then asks Mike who's signing the warrant, and he tells her that it'll be Judge Pierce. And Evelyn assumes that Mike wants her to make the call, which he does. And she agrees. Then she asks if SWAT will be serving the warrant. And we all know why she's asking that. Mike says yes, but that he's got Big Rob handled. Evelyn asks Mike if he's sure, and he says yes as he walks out. And see, this is the writers kind of keeping that whole storyline alive about Evelyn kind of pursuing corruption in the KPD. I can't imagine that that's something that she's prepared to let go at this point, even though Mike maybe has her distracted just a bit because he's giving her all that good loving, at the crib. You know what I'm saying? But, we'll see. Now, next, we see Tracy in the office of Warden Tanya Michaels, the warden of the female prison. And they're sitting at her desk talking about Miriam. And, Warden Michaels claims that Miriam used to sit across from her a lot when she was alive, and not once did she not give her heartburn. She then asks Tracy if she's going to give her heartburn. Now, Tracy tells her that it's not her intent before she tells her about Cherry. Now, Warden Michaels tells Tracy that she knows who Cherry is, that she murdered a guard claiming she was protecting herself from a sexual assault. Tracy asks if the guard indeed assaulted her, and Warden Michaels refuses to dignify that question with an answer. Now, Tracy claims that it couldn't have been him, but that she was pregnant and just gave birth. She goes on to tell Warden Michaels that Cherry has been inside for 3 years, so that means she got pregnant while she was incarcerated. Warden Michaels tells Tracy that it wouldn't be the first time a prisoner took a guard as a boyfriend. And this is where Tracy explains to Warden Michaels that the power dynamic doesn't allow for it, as if, that has anything to do with the nature of human beings. But okay, I understand why she's doing it. It's a plot device. Warden Michaels tells her that that's why it's forbidden in every DLC manual going back decades. She then tells Tracy that she'll look into it, but notes that if Cherry isn't willing to come forward with the name of the father, that there's nothing that she can do. And this is where Tracy corrects Warden Michaels, calling the father of Cherry's baby an assailant, not the father, claiming that whoever impregnated her needs to be in prison themselves. And Warden Michaels then tells Tracy to call the anonymous tip line. But Tracy tells her that she doesn't need anonymity. And Warden Michaels tells Tracy that she should approach the situation from all angles because she wants to protect everyone involved, both prisoner and guard. And here's where I think Tracy has decided to take up Miriam's mantle as it pertains to advocating for prisoners. And Tracy and Kyle even kind of had some conversations earlier this season about this very thing. And I think this has been an interesting part of the story so far because remember in season 1, Miriam seemed really upset at the fact that, Mike took over from Mitch when he died, advocating for prisoners in Kingstown. But then by season 2, she was doing the very same thing, advocating for the young man who beat her up and tried to rob her, and then trying to get the young man moved at the end of the season, the young man who ended up unaliving himself. And now we have Tracy seemingly taking up that responsibility after Miriam's death. And it looks like prisoner advocacy really is a McCluskey family business at this point. I mean, everybody has dipped their toe in it, even Kyle, by helping Mike in past seasons. And now that we know that my man Sam's baby is not the baby that Cherry is carrying, because I was kind of confused about how much time had passed from season 1 to season 3, and that's why I was like, I don't really know if the math would math or not. But now that we know that the time period doesn't match up, I have to assume again, like I said, that this baby is CO Breen's, and that's why he's been so insistent that Tracy could leave and that he would handle things in her absence. I think that's also why the other nurse was making such a big deal about how attractive he was an episode or two ago. I think the two of them have been banging, if you're just really just asking me what I think. And I don't know if the whole power dynamic issue is a problem with them. As Cherry's an attractive woman. Clearly, everybody can see that herself. And she's already shown herself to be, let's just call it unabashed, sexually speaking. So I could absolutely see her seeking out CO Breen for sex, not him putting pressure on her for sex. Similarly to how she did with Sam, even though that situation was all to precipitate a hit, but she did not look like she wasn't enjoying what was happening while it was happening. Before she ultimately stabbed him in the neck with a pencil, that is. Nevertheless, I want to be clear. The rules in prisons are what they are for these kinds of things. So if indeed that is CO Breen's kid, which I really think it is, because I also, I also think about the fact that we didn't actually see the baby get born, and I'm sure that wasn't an accident as well. So I think the storyline involving CO Breen might have a really unhappy ending. And the fact that he's white and she's black, I don't think she would care very much at all if he went down for getting her pregnant, even if their relationship might have been completely consensual, even though the law says that it can't be. Anyway, next we find Merle and his Norseman in the prison library doing some light reading. And remember, Merle, when he was at the other prison, he would do this kind of thing with other inmates as well. So this is kind of like a take me under your wing kind of situation. But Kareem and Carney both enter with another guard in tow, and Kareem tells Merle to get up. When he asks why, Kareem tells him that there's been a credible threat on his life and that they need to isolate him. Merle asks, who threatened him? Kareem tells him to stand. Carney then leans in close to him and he tells him to get the F up. Merle finally stands and stares Carney down, eventually, kind of blowing him a kiss before ultimately leaving with Kareem. Now, next, we see Mike on the road, as he is in a lot of these episodes. He calls Iris and he warns her about the cops. Now, Iris speaks in code because Constantine is nearby, before she just ultimately ends the call to Mike's dismay. Now, Mike then speaks to Kareem, who is walking outside to his vehicle, dressed down. And, so he's off work. He tells Mike that Merle was sent down to the hole. Mike asks if he was clean. Kareem tells him that they didn't find anything on him. And then Mike asks about a cavity search, and Kareem tells him that he had no cause. Kareem then stares at one of the buildings nearby, and he seems to pause and think for a moment before telling Mike that, he'll get it done and, getting in his car. And next, we see Carney and Kevin Jackson searching underneath the cars in the prison auto shop. So that's what Kareem was looking at. He might have cracked the case, you feel me? And at first, they're unable to find anything in or around the vehicles being worked on. But eventually, Carney notices that there's a bumper missing on one of the cars. And just then, Carney gets a one-way call that seems to upset him. Now, next, we see KPD roll up on Cavo, and the SWAT boys hop out the SWAT van, you feel me, and they get to it. They enter the club, guns out, and they start, hemming people up. And in all the commotion, Constantine, remains chill, but Iris does not. And eventually Big Rob elbows her in the face. Kyle then grabs her and pulls her to the side, and she starts to act up again, but Kyle has to tell her, look, calm down and just put the handcuffs on, stop tripping. And as that's happening, my man Ian rolls in with the good old search warrant. And, from there, we see Mike still on the road, getting a call from Kyle, who is now outside the club, as the police load up all the perps. And he tells Mike that the Russians are in cuffs with no shots fired, just like he wanted. Mike then asks about Iris, and Kyle tells him that she got a little roughed up. So Mike asks who did it. Kyle tries to run interference. Mike asks again who did it. And Kyle tells Mike that she did in fact interfere and that she caught an elbow, but that she's okay. And after hanging up with Mike, Kyle sees Rob standing over by the SWAT van, and it looks as though he's upset. Now, I mean, I don't know if he's upset because he hit Iris or what. Like, because typically, because we've seen Big Rob actually shoot a female. Like, matter of fact, I don't remember the episode, but the SWAT team stormed a house in one of the episodes, and a perp took a girl that was hanging out in the house, essentially hostage. And Rob shot him, and then when the girl, cried out for help, he shot her too. So he ain't got no qualms about putting his hands on male or female. It don't matter. So maybe I'm thinking he's just kind of upset because he knows that Mike's going to be upset, and maybe he just don't want to hear Mike's shit. You know what I mean? And I wonder if this is going to be something that starts to fracture the relationship between Mike and Rob if Mike ever finds out that Rob is the one who hit Iris. Like maybe if Mike feels that, Robert came for Iris, he might be less inclined to protect him from Evelyn as that storyline moves forward. But I think this will definitely get mentioned at some point before the season is done. And so we'll just have to wait and see how that goes. Now, from there, we see Carney and Kevin back at the prison. And they are set upon in a small fenced-off area by a group of guards, clearly all Aryan affiliated. One of the guards calls Kevin Smokey. Man, the dialogue in this show. And tells him to take a pass, which seems to upset Kevin a little bit. The guard then goes on to tell Kevin that they plan to tune Carney up, but that they'll actually throw him off the tier. And Carney tells Jackson not to move, but he moves anyway. So much for, friendship. The guard asks Carney if he's got a thing for Merle. And Carney tells him that if he has a problem with what happened, then he needs to take it up with the warden. The guard tells Carney that he doesn't work for the warden. He then asks Carney to tell him who he does work for. And Carney responds saying simply, F you. And at that point, the guards beat him up pretty badly before they leave him there laying on the ground. So I am assuming that, Carney searched Merle off the word of Kareem after Mike said, hey, did you have him searched? So before, once Kareem got in the car, he probably called Carney and said, hey, search Merle. Carney searched Merle, and then, this whole thing is what came from that. Now, next, we see Ian and Stevie interrogating Constantine. Now, he asks if they found anything at the club. Stevie tells him that they found cocaine residue, bad visas, and Constantine tells the guys that he just patronized the club, that he has no actual stake in it. Stevie tells him that despite that fact, he might have to answer for what they found in the club anyway. Now, Ian, jumps in the conversation and tells him that Tatiana's baby survived. And Constantine looks confused, but Ian reminds him that he shot Tatiana in the head and left the baby for dead in the dumpster outside the club. Now, Constantine asks if that's why he was arrested. Stevie tells Constantine that a lot of bodies have dropped since he arrived in Kingstown, and Constantine tells him to take it up with Milo. Smart ass. Ian tells him that would be a bit of a chore unless Milo is haunting the Cavo. And Constantine tells him that he does indeed believe in spirits, but that if Ian wants info on Milo, he could surely get it from Mike. Ian tells Constantine that he knows what he did and that he's got no future in Kingstown. And Constantine assumes that Mike is beyond reproach, and he asks who in Kingstown are the cops and who are the criminals, before telling both Ian and Stevie that he sees them. And Ian, responds to Constantine and says, I see you too. Now, Mike and Iris at the moment are in the evidence locker, and Mike is told by Keno, a lesser known and lesser shown KPD officer, that they found enough to question Constantine, but that they don't have enough for any charges. And, Mike says he understands, and he then asks Keno for ice, so Keno goes and gets ice. And while he's gone, Mike then tells Iris that when he calls her, it's a risk. Iris claims she understands. Mike goes on to tell her that when he does contact her, it's with a purpose. This time, it was so she didn't get caught in the crossfire when the cops showed up. And Iris insists that there was no crossfire, which we know. But Mike tells her that's because he waved the cops off, but that even in those circumstances, there are no guarantees. Now, he tells Iris that she has to listen. Iris insists that she is listening, but that she couldn't leave right before the cops arrived because it would have looked suspicious. She tells Mike that she's simply arm candy for Constantine, that she's fun. And simply put, she's his drug buddy, and that if they compromise that he'll kill her quicker than he killed Tatiana. She tells Mike that she's not special to him, but Mike insists that she's special enough. Mike then asks Iris if she's okay, and she says she is. Then Mike reiterates one more time that she has to listen. And then he asks her if there's any news. And Iris tells him that Constantine's got girls coming in from Europe and that they're going to be crossing the border soon, and that he's going to sort them and chip them and then send them out to modeling agencies across the Northeast. And just then, Mike gets a call and as Keno comes back with the ice. Mike asks Keno to help Iris while he takes the call. It's Merle, calling from the shoe on a cell phone he shouldn't have, asking Mike if he merits an audience. Mike tells him that it'll have to be tomorrow. And Merle tells Mike that he doesn't feel very special at the moment. And then Mike sarcastically tells Merle that he's at the top of the list of special. And he hangs up the phone and he leaves the evidence room. And, I'm starting to wonder what the deal is exactly with Iris and Constantine, because the writers are starting to confuse me a bit here. Because when the two of them talk, you can clearly see that Iris is extremely important to Constantine. But here she is telling Mike that she's not special to him at all. And I wonder who exactly she's playing here and why. The situation does set up for a nasty little twist if it turns out that Iris has a deep enough past with Constantine to pretend to be on Mike's team while she helps him and Constantine instead. But, now that Mike and Iris are not going to be together, the way I see it, all she can really provide to this particular story is to either betray Mike or die. I think anything else is just missing the point. Because she had the chance to leave Kingstown and she didn't. And so that means she has to be there for a reason. So to have her, leave, at the end of this season or next season or whenever, it just feels like, well, if she was just going to leave Kingstown, and she could have done that already. But, I'm not too sure which one it's going to be yet, but we're getting pretty late in the season, so I feel like that wave should be breaking any minute now. And I guess we'll just have to see what's what. And I hope we see that soon. So next, we see, Ro and Raphael's son at home. And he's on a video game, like teenagers are. And she asks if he has homework. He says he did it already. Yeah, I know that little excuse. I mean, maybe he did, but Then she asks if there's anything he can get ahead of. And again, he says no. She tells him that his dad said hello. He doesn't seem to care very much. And unfortunately, this response seems typical of teenagers in these kind of shows when they have parents locked up like this. I'm sure he feels abandoned, and so he's analyzing the choices that got his father locked up in the first place and making those choices mean that he must not really care about him, something like that. So the kid feels distance when he thinks about his father. Anyway, Ro goes on to tell him that his father is proud of him, but again, he seems unfazed and just continues playing the video game. Meanwhile, back at the prison, Raphael is losing it. He got his shirt off, he's sweating, he's yelling, he's punching walls, that whole thing. So next, we see Carney limping to his car, dressed in civilian clothes. And he calls Mike and he tells him that they found out how the Aryans are moving the drugs inside the prison. He tells Mike that they took over the auto body shop. Mike says cool, but then asks how Merle is calling him from the shoe. They must got real good service. And the shoe, you calling somebody from the shoe? He tells Mike that the guards affiliated with the Aryans just tried to off him for trying to search him. Carney then tells Mike that he needs to take the night off and go check on his dad. So, Mike tells him to go ahead and rest up. Now, the next morning, we see Bunny leaving the funeral home with, I'm assuming, Rhonda's mother. And he apologizes for not allowing Rhonda to be hurt, but she doesn't seem to blame him. Now, Mike arrives and the pair go inside and they stand over a casket and talk about a man that died in his sleep of old age. Now, Bunny tells Mike that, he survived their life, that he raised his family in it, that he then sent all his kids away, but that he stayed. And Bunny seems both impressed and sad that this was the case. And he asked Mike if he can imagine dying old in his sleep. And Mike doesn't answer him, but he does seem to think about the question that Bunny is posing him. And, look, that's a heavy question. One that I'll admit I've never really had to answer, but I know some people, as I'm sure a lot of us do, that never expected to live past 18 or 21 or, whatever arbitrary age, that they have in their heads because of the place or the circumstance that they were born into. And I think this was a powerful scene because this is something that both Mike and Bunny can relate to. They lived lives of violence, both of them. And when you live life that way, there's typically only two ways those roads tend to end, and that's jail or under the dirt. And even when you go to jail, you see in Kingstown, you can end up under the dirt real easy. And in order to survive those circumstances, you have to learn to face that pretty early on. And, that's just always been a sad reality for a lot of young people I've known. And, as the show is concerned for these two particular characters. Now, in the next scene, we see Tracy at home playing with baby Mitch, and Kyle comes home, realizes that they both have the next 24 hours off, and he joins her on the floor with him. Now, he asks her how work was, and she tells him that she spoke with the warden at the women's prison. But when he asks her what about, she doesn't tell him. And Kyle then just reminds Tracy that his mother used to give the warden at the female prison hell on a daily basis. So, I wonder if Tracy is maybe biting off a bit more than she can chew here, messing with the warden about this situation. And that's why she won't tell Kyle what the conversation she had with the warden was about. And remember, Tracy didn't want anonymity here. So it's clear to me that people, once this news comes out about this, that everyone's going to know who it is who's digging into this. And I wonder if she might find herself in a situation once it comes to light that she's looking into Cherry's baby daddy. And I guess, again, like I said, we'll see, that pretty soon because that feels like something that'll wrap up by season's end. It doesn't feel like that's something that's going to go on past this season. Now, in the next scene, Mike shows up to meet Merle in the kennel. And Merle asks if he had dogs. Mike, if he had dogs. And Mike says he had them as a kid and that he was feeding a bear for a while. And Mike asks what he's doing there. Merle tells Mike that Kareem put him in the hole probably because he wanted to feel strong. But then he thinks for a second and he asks, or was that you? And, Mike admits to the move and Merle asks him, if he feels strong. Now, Mike tells Merle that he should have told him about the Russians. He tells Merle that he needed a moment to get a handle on things, and Merle tells him that the math here is pretty simple, that he needs to either push the Crips back or let him handle his shit his way. And Mike tells Merle that Constantine doesn't understand the rules in Kingstown and that there needs to be a balance. There's that word again. Anyway, Merle asks Mike when they ever had balance. He reminds him that, they didn't have balance with Mitch and that it's always been more of a back and forth, like a pendulum. Mike tells Merle that they were pretty close to balance when he left Kingstown, but Merle calls bullshit. He tells Mike that prison is like a border zone, like a region of transition between two biological communities, like where mountains meet the desert. And he tells Mike that those are the places where predators feed. Mike asks Merle what he's going to do when Constantine has no more use for him, and he tells Mike that he and Constantine are the same breed. He tells Mike that Constantine won't come at him as long as he keeps getting fed, just like Mike's bear. Merle explains that if you feed the bear so it doesn't turn on you. And this was the moment that I saw where they were headed with this particular conversation, But Mike tells Merle that he's certain that by now that bear has been shot dead. Merle tells Mike he only does business with predators. He tells Mike to show him that he's a predator. And then he gets to the ask I've been waiting for all season because I knew it was coming. And he tells Mike essentially that the price of balance in Kingstown is Bunny's death. Mike tells Merle that he's a long way from making hits. He tells Mike, though, that if he's not a predator, then he's prey, and that he needs to make a decision. He then turns and walks away, and so does Mike before the episode cuts to black. And look, I've been telling you guys that the writers have been setting up a possible showdown between Mike and Bunny since late last season. And once this season got set up, I knew Merle was going to make this ask of Mike. And though I'm certain Mike won't do it, this is clearly going to be the thing that puts everyone that Mike cares about in jeopardy. And I kind of wonder if Bunny hears about this ask somehow, because, Bunny got his ears to the street. And the prison, because, Kevin Jackson is there. I wonder if Bunny might get a little overly emotional and overreact, like sometimes he's known to do, and come at Mike first, a little kind of crazy, and thinking that Mike might actually be thinking about trying him. And, we've only got 4 more of these this season, so I'm guessing the answer won't be too far off. Now, so far, this season has been a lot of pins being set up, not very many of them being knocked down. And even though, those that have been knocked down didn't really make a lot of noise, if you ask me. So it's just been kind of little stuff, like, who was spiking the drugs, who killed the young lady who came to see Big, I forgot, I can't think of the guy's name, who died in like the second episode of the season, I'm looking forward to seeing the next few episodes, just how much of that changes. I'm expecting the tempo to pick up considerably here, like it did in previous seasons, and I'm expecting for questions to be answered. Lots of questions. Like, what's the real deal between Iris and Constantine? Is Tracy biting off more than she can chew at work? Are Bunny and Mike headed for a showdown of sorts? And is Merle underestimating just how dangerous Constantine is? Is Evelyn going to advance her war on KPD corruption? Does Rob finally get caught up in her dragnet? And what about Ian? Do we see Charlie again this season? And the whole situation with what happened at the supposed home invasion last season, does that come back up? Does C.O. Breen wind up in prison? And where in the world is my girl Rebecca? Like, they doing my girl dirty this season for real, man. I'm not even feeling it. Anyway, as I stated, there's been a lot that's been set up this season. And the writers are starting to run out of road here, if you ask me. So I'm hoping that moving forward, we only get scenes and characters that are important to completing the picture they've been trying to reveal to us to this point. No more, Rhonda situations. And, that's going to make or break this season in my book. But what do you guys think? Did you enjoy the 6th episode of this season? What's your favorite storyline so far? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. Also, be sure to go and check out themaskscreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write. And I'll catch y'all on the next video.